Okay, I'm gonna cover this one because I walked in Georgia. I went to Georgia for the 2020 election to help flip the Senate, and I stayed there for a month. Um, this was before we had the vaccination, and we were adhering to very stringent COVID requirements. So our most dangerous time was actually traveling to and from Georgia. I spent Christmas there so that I wouldn't have to have additional flights back and forth. And I stayed alone in a hotel room. I wore a face shield and a mask at all times when I was around other people and in the elevator and doing my laundry and everything else. And I ordered groceries and packed my own lunches and dinners almost every day. There were some times that I actually ordered food in so that I could have some Southern cuisine while I was out there. But anyway, let me interject on this particular video.
Here is CNN's Victor Blackwell with the Georgia Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan, and it gives you a little bit of sense of how sort of some of the Republicans are looking at Herschel Walker's chances in this runoff. There was a great piece by Ryan Grimm in The Intercept, which put to lie the notion that we're living in an era, particularly when we're talking about, this era, of where we should be trying to persuade independence and whatnot, that we're in an era of.
By the way, the siren, that's like on their video. That's not on my video. So I don't know about that. The loud truck, the loud MAGA truck, that was on my side.
Of persuasion with elections as opposed to mobilization, and particularly in regards to youth voters. Ryan Grimm caught David Shore, who has been deified by the so-called popularists, where we should, be tracking positions that are more popular with these sort of independents, to the lie that they've been claiming that.
How is that? I'd like to know more about this. How are popularists different than populists? Is this, are your notes wrong? Like, I'm gonna have to look this up. Are these two different terms? Sorry.
There's really not much happening in terms of the youth vote, and they did it relative to the registered youth vote population. That there wasn't that has been more or less static. What it did not take into account was in 2016, Georgia implemented motor voter registration. So the numbers of people who
Okay, so he doesn't explain what that is. Motor voter registration is something that we actually have in California too. That's when you go to get your license at the DMV. I don't know if they call it the DMV in Georgia. It might be called something else, but in California, it's called the Department of Motor Vehicles. When you go to get a license or to even just get like a California identification, they automatically register you to vote. So that's important to note. That's what motor voter registration is.
Registered went up, but so did the number of people who voted. So if you compare raw voting data, you will see that youth vote has been increasing, but the denominator also increased, but not by any effort on part of the voting population, but because it became much easier to register. So if youth voting was static, and the impetus to vote by youth was static, you would see actually a loss, relatively speaking, to the potential pool of youth voters.
Well, there's more to it than that, actually, too. Okay, so because they put in motor voter registration, they also, if I remember correctly, they also modeled around California and sent people their absentee ballots. I'm not sure if it was like universal, like what we do in certain counties in California, which most counties I think have gone to vote centers. They haven't done this in Georgia yet, the vote centers, but most counties have gone to vote centers and 100% vote by mail. So in California, in Orange County, LA County, San Diego County, and probably several other counties up and down the state, their ballots are just automatically mailed to them. And when I was walking in Georgia, there were a lot of people on my list who had absentee ballots, and I think it was like 100%, but I don't remember exactly because this is a couple of years back, so I'm trying to go by memory. But there were a lot of doors I knocked on who they didn't even realize they were registered to vote because of this motor voter thing. So, like, I knocked on a lot of Jehovah's Witness doors where they told me straight up, hey, we're Jehovah's Witness, we don't vote, that's not part of our religion. And it's because of this law, and that's what he's leaving out some details.
Instead of a maintenance of that, you've increased the denominator. And so the numerator has also gone up. So we've actually seen a growth in youth voting in Georgia in particular. And so maybe somebody got the memo. Here is that the lieutenant governor.
You're not going to have control of the Senate regardless of what happens in this race in Georgia, as you know. So given that, does Herschel Walker have your endorsement?
Yeah, I think it's interesting to watch the statistics. AARP came out with a poll today that the AJC ran that 51-47, which is still within the margin of error, breaking towards Warnock. And I think there's, a little bit surprising. It feels like the delta should be more than that. But I think it's one, Governor Kemp came out strong on Saturday in support of Herschel Walker, which obviously he's done well. But also Donald Trump failed in his announcement, right? It just seems like a national dud. And if it would have been a success and it would have been the talk of the town, I think you would have seen Herschel Walker maybe have a little bit tougher time keeping it as close as it is. But another interesting statistic, 54-39.
Oh my God, I love watching Republicans trash Republicans. So this is a Republican lieutenant governor. This isn't even the governor. This is the lieutenant governor who is saying that Trump's announcement was a dud. Excuse me. The temperature's dropping. The temperature's dropping. That's so good. It's so good because, Trump back in 2020, Georgia was a key state. This is one of the reasons the insurrection happened, is that he was so pissed off that we lost the Senate, on top of him trying to say that it was stop the steal or whatever, that we were stealing the election from him. He tried really hard to flip Georgia, and the people in charge of actually counting the vote, like the attorney general of that state, the governor of that state, they were all Republicans, and they're like, dude, we have sworn an oath to the Constitution. Fuck's sake.
Is the independents in that same poll for Warnock. And I think this is a turnout game. If we can get folks to turn out, and like I said, I've been critical throughout this whole process. I just felt like, Herschel Walker had a hard time getting my attention as a rock-solid conservative. Just because he was famous and just because Donald Trump supported him wasn't enough to get my respect or my vote.
All right, let's turn now.
But wait a second.
My vote!
Hold on.
Was that an answer to are you endorsing him for the December run?
Oh, that's interesting. Does that mean he did not vote for him in the midterm election? Does that mean did he not vote for him in the midterms? That's actually really good. That's a good catch, y'all.
I was going to say, did they got those guys at CNN? Oh, we don't need to really have an answer to that question. We just asked it to see what you would say.
Yeah.
We just wanted to see what you would say, if you would even address the question.
Are you endorsing him? Are you endorsing him? And his response is, Trump's announcement didn't help him. He's down in the polls. and independents don't want him, and he didn't have my respect in the primary.
And he's maybe not a true conservative because he's a celebrity.
He's the second in command in Georgia, the second highest ranking public elected official in Georgia.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. This is maybe the only state in the country right now that's actually engaging in a Republican civil war, and the non-Trump side is winning to a degree within the Republican Party, right? Like, I mean, I know Herschel.
Oh, and this is so good for us too, because, like, by the way, okay, so when I went out in 2020, basically Stacey Abrams had reached out to all the unions across the country to send their best walkers to come out and flip the election. And that was part of my script. That was part of my rap, is when I knocked on the doors, and if they were irritated because their doors were constantly getting knocked on, I would straight up say, Stacey Abrams asked us to come out here. They said that you are not used to being a swing state, that this is not a usual situation for you, and it's really important that you show up to the polls, because it's a very close race, and we've been asked to come to get you to show up and vote. That's the big deal here. And so that was part of my rap when I was knocking on doors, and we were very successful at it. And I can tell you straight up, the operation is happening again. I know for a fact the unions are back out there, and this is my prediction, Warnock wins the runoff.
Walker is the Senate candidate, but Raffensperger, his whole kind of, and Kemp, and they feel burned by Trump, right?
Yeah.
They feel burned by the whole process of being dragged into Trump saying, like, just find some votes somewhere. And so that wing of the party is, like, being fairly vocal in opposition to the Trump wing. And you just kind of see how, I mean, and they're having way more success relative to other more Republican established.
And honestly, I'm glad to see you all taking it back. I am glad to see you taking it back, because I think there's a difference between, just like having different views on political ideology, like big government, small government, like states' rights versus federal rights. Those are things that we can debate pretty rationally and in polite society. But the shit that Trump has brought to the table has been so destructive that, like, he's inviting Nazis in to take over. Like, look at Elon Musk. Look what he's doing to Twitter.
Types fighting back against the MAGA candidates throughout the country.
Yeah, Georgia is an interesting, I think, anomaly. And I have a feeling a lot of those people outside of Georgia are going to come into the fold. Do we have the erection clip? Hey, this video is sponsored by Established Titles. What is Established Titles? It is a fun novelty gift that also helps you preserve some natural woodlands.
Okay, I think the video is pretty much done. I think we're only going to get like ads after this. But I imagine that we're probably going to see Mondale Robinson go back in there with the Black Voter Project. I don't know, though, because he has said on a few different live streams that a lot of the black population feels a bit burned by Biden. I don't know how they feel now. There have been certain packages that gave us some things that we wanted, but really not everything that we wanted. And so I'm not sure where people are really landing, especially the black population. And it really was the black population that turned out and flipped that election. They were the ones. And the doors I was knocking on, I was in Snellville, which is a suburb of Atlanta. And it was mostly suburban neighborhoods, but they also, like, every single one of them had, like, doorbell cams and stuff. Like, it was really locked down, even though it looked like what I saw in Georgia looked like the richest neighborhoods in California. They had so much land, they had giant homes, but their homes cost less than my condo. It was like amazingly huge properties. And they were still experiencing a lot of crime. And so oftentimes after dark, because we would walk until about 8 o'clock at night, and this is in wintertime, so it was dark. And I would oftentimes be told, sweetheart, you need to go home. It's not safe for you to be out here right now. Now, I never ran into real problems. I did have one Republican chase me down the road. That was hilarious, but it was also scary. Like, I knocked on this one door. They didn't answer, so I rolled up the literature and put it on the door. And it was a long ass driveway. And this particular neighborhood, the houses were so far apart that I was driving between the houses. I wasn't walking between all the houses. And I had a canvas partner really closely near me. And I knew she would be in more trouble than me because she was Muslim, and she had on whatever that headscarf is called. I can't remember. I'm spacing on what it's called right now. And she was my partner that day. And I saw that guy. He took the lit, came down the driveway, waving it over his head and chasing me down the road. And so I drove up next to her and I said, we have to leave. We have to leave turf right now, because I don't know if that guy has a weapon on him or what the hell is going on, but he is chasing us down the street. So we ended up driving a few blocks away, calling our team lead, and getting moved to different turf. That was like within my first week in Georgia. It was like my first week in Georgia. All right. I think he's only doing ads after this, so I'm not going to cover the rest of it. But yeah, Georgia is a hot battleground state now. It didn't used to be, but now it is.